2:06 a.m. The Gulf of Oman, 78 nautical miles southeast of the Iranian port of Bandar Abbas, 104 nautical miles north of the Omani coast at Ras Al Had. The sea here is 2,300 meters deep, a bowl of warm, clear water enclosed between the Makran coast of Iran to the north and the desert mountain ranges of Oman to the south, connected to the Persian Gulf through the 33-mile choke of the Strait of Hormuz, 40 miles to the northwest. Temperature 26 degrees Celsius. Moderate swell from the east-southeast, sea state 2. The skies cloudless, stars sharp and brilliant from horizon to horizon. The kind of night where every ship on the water casts a faint shadow from the starlight alone. The USS Harry S. Truman, CVN-75, a Nimitz-class nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, the eighth ship of her class, holds course at 16 knots on an easterly heading, transiting outbound from the Persian Gulf through the Gulf of Oman toward the Arabian Sea after 31 days of Fifth Fleet operations. She is the operational center of Carrier Strike Group 8, and her transit through the Gulf of Oman on this night is neither routine nor unexpected. The Truman has made this transit 11 times in her operational history, and on each occasion the IRGCN has tracked her passage through the corridor with coastal radar, surface surveillance ships, and the intelligence feeds from the network of sympathetic maritime observers that Iran maintains along the Gulf of Oman coastline. The Truman's transit windows are known to the IRGCN with remarkable precision. Tonight's departure from the Persian Gulf was logged by 3 separate IRGCN intelligence systems within 4 minutes of the formation clearing the Hormuz main shipping lane. Around her, the cruiser USS Hugh City, CG-66, 1 mile ahead, AN/SPY-1A in continuous active search mode, her CG designation and her decades of operational experience making her the formation's senior surface combatant. The destroyers USS Winston S. Churchill, DDG-81, and USS Gravely, DDG-107, at the forward quarters, both Aegis baseline 9.C1, both loaded to maximum VLS capacity following a magazine reload at Jebel Ali 11 days earlier. The destroyer USS Lassen, DDG-82, at the stern quarter. Above the formation at 23,000 feet, the E-2D Advanced Hawkeye from Carrier Air Wing 3 orbits with its AN/APY-9, covering 300 nautical miles in every direction. Its coverage extends deep into Iranian territory, over Bandar Abbas, over the missile battery positions in the Zagros foothills east of the city, over the coastal surveillance network whose feeds were flowing to the IRGCN command post at Jask, 40 miles to the southeast. The IRGCN's 2nd Naval District at Bandar Abbas had been tracking the Truman's outbound transit since 9:47 p.m. The strike authorization had been issued at 11 p.m. by the IRGCN commander in coordination with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps General Command, the highest authorization level in the IRGCN chain, and a decision that reflected the months of preparation that had gone into the targeting package now ready for launch. The target was the Truman herself, not an escort, not a symbolic near-miss into the water nearby. The IRGCN planners had assessed that a strike on the carrier's island structure or flight deck that disabled her aviation operations for 90 days would constitute a strategic-level achievement. Proof that Iranian precision strike capability had matured to the point where it could hold an American carrier at risk in the waters Iran regarded as its strategic backyard. The strike package had been designed around a two-phase simultaneous attack concept that the IRGCN's operational research team had refined through 18 months of simulation and analysis. Phase 1. 12 Zolfaghar-S precision short-range ballistic missiles from 2 batteries in the Zagros foothills east of Bandar Abbas. The S variant, with its penetrating warhead designed for hardened surface targets, solid fuel, GPS corrected to CEP under 10 meters, Mach 4.5 terminal velocity, near vertical terminal descent profile. The 12 Zolfaghar-S warheads would arrive on the formation from above, their near-vertical descent profile making them the most difficult threat for surface-based close-in weapon systems to engage. Phase 2. 64 Shahed 238 jet-powered loitering munitions from 4 concealed coastal launch positions north and east of Bandar Abbas, programmed on GPS inertial courses toward the Truman's projected position, timed to arrive on the formation in 2 converging waves. 32 from the northwest axis as the Zolfaghar-S engagement was forcing the formation's radar and VLS systems to commit upward, and 32 from the northeast axis arriving simultaneously from a different bearing. 76 weapons total. 2 simultaneous threat vectors, ballistic from above and drone swarm from the horizon. The IRGCN planner's assessment. The combination would split the formation's engagement attention and magazine allocation between 2 fundamentally different threat profiles simultaneously, producing a defensive saturation window that would allow at least 4 to 6 Shahed 238Es to reach the Truman's hull. They made 5 catastrophic mistakes. The first mistake, the missile battery thermal preparation. The 12 Zolfaghar-S missiles were solid-fuel weapons whose guidance system initialization, the gyroscope alignment, the GPS constellation acquisition, the DSMAC coordinate loading required a pre-launch warm-up sequence of 14 to 22 minutes. During that window, the 2 IRGCN battery command vehicles were radiating GPS and digital data link emissions that the RC-135V/W Rivet Joint reconnaissance aircraft from Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, on its standard Gulf of Oman collection orbit since 8 p.m., had been monitoring continuously. The RC-135V/W crew characterized the dual battery guidance initialization emissions beginning at 1:44 a.m., 22 minutes before the planned launch time, and transmitted a launch imminent assessment to the Truman Strike Group at 1:47 a.m. The formation had 19 minutes of confirmed launch warning before the first Zolfaghar-S fired. 19 minutes in which all 4 ships shifted to full Aegis ballistic mode. All CEC engagement assignments were pre-computed, and every fire control solution was developed and queued. The attack, for which the IRGCN had spent 18 months preparing, met a defense that had been in full engagement-ready posture for 19 minutes before the first missile left its tube. The second mistake, the Shahed 238 launch timing. The 64 Shahed 238 loitering munitions were launched from their 4 coastal positions beginning at 2:04 a.m., 2 minutes before the Zolfaghar-S launch, to ensure they arrived simultaneously with the ballistic missile's terminal phase descent. 2 minutes before the Zolfaghar-S launched. 2 minutes in which the E-2Ds AN/APY-9 radar and ground moving target indicator mode acquired the launch transients of 64 jet-powered vehicles departing their coastal positions in a staggered sequence, classified all 64 as confirmed aerial threats, and transmitted the complete track picture to the formation's CEC network. By the time the first Zolfaghar-S ignited at 2:06 a.m., the CEC engagement manager already had 64 Shahed tracks assigned to specific interceptors on specific ships. The simultaneous dual-vector attack that was designed to split the defense's attention was processed as two separate, pre-assigned engagement queues that had been running in parallel for 2 minutes before the ballistic component even launched. The simultaneity that was supposed to be the attack's strength had instead given the defense 2 extra minutes to prepare the drone engagement, while the ballistic warning was already 14 minutes old. The third mistake, the near-vertical terminal profile. The Zolfaghar-S's near-vertical terminal descent, the feature the IRGCN planners had identified as the characteristic that made it most difficult for surface-based close-in weapon systems to engage, was also the characteristic that made it most visible and most trackable during its mid-course phase. A ballistic missile on a near-vertical terminal trajectory spends a longer time in the high-altitude mid-course phase above the atmosphere than a flatter trajectory would, because the near-vertical descent requires a higher apogee to position the warhead for its steep terminal approach. The longer mid-course phase above the atmosphere was precisely where the SM-2 Block IIIB in its ballistic engagement mode was most effective, acquiring the inbound re-entry vehicle at high altitude against the clean black backdrop of space, well before the terminal descent profile mattered. The near-vertical approach that was designed to defeat the final layer of defense instead made the engagement of the mid-course layer easier. The fourth mistake, the magazine calculation. The IRGCN's assessment of the Truman Strike Group's available interceptors had been built from published VLS cell counts and assessed loadout fractions for a carrier strike group at the midpoint of a deployment, accounting for missiles expended in previous defensive engagements during the Truman's 31 days in the Persian Gulf. The assessment calculated approximately 140 available interceptors across 4 ships. The actual count was 218, full magazine loads across all 4 ships, loaded at Jebel Ali 11 days earlier, with 0 interceptors expended in the 31 days of Persian Gulf operations. The Truman's deployment had been threat-quiet in terms of actual engagements. No Houthi or IRGCN weapon had been fired at the strike group during its Persian Gulf operations. Every interceptor loaded at Jebel Ali was still in its cell. The IRGCN had calculated a defense with 78 fewer interceptors than were actually available. The fifth mistake, the same fundamental error that has characterized every IRGCN attempt to develop a credible anti-carrier capability in the Gulf of Oman, was the assumption that the Truman's tactical situation on a standard transit was equivalent to a wartime surge posture. It was not. The Truman was not on a peacetime transit when the IRGCN attack initiated. She had been at heightened defensive alert since the RC-135V/W's launch imminent warning at 1:47 a.m. She had been at general quarters since 1:51 a.m. Her crew of 5,061 had been at battle stations for 15 minutes before the first Zolfaghar-S left its launcher. The flight deck had been cleared, the hangar deck sealed, the damage control teams positioned, the Aegis systems running in full automatic engagement mode. The IRGCN planners had modeled the reaction time of a formation receiving a surprise attack. They had delivered an attack against a formation that had been in full battle posture for 15 minutes. At 2:06 a.m. and 9 seconds after the first Zolfaghar-S ignited in the Zagros foothills, the SBIRS alert reaches the formation's C2BMC link. The track data is already computed and queued. The E2D transmits updated track integration for the combined 76 weapon picture. All units, Hugh City. Weapons free, all tracks. Execute Truman defense. CEC control. Maximum engagement rate. The USS Hugh City fires first against the 12 Zolfaghar-S ballistic tracks. 16 SM-2 Block IIIB missiles climb from the cruiser's forward and aft VLS cells in an 18-second ripple. Their infrared terminal seekers programmed against the Zolfaghar-S's reentry vehicle thermal signature computed from the SBIRS track data. The SM-2 Block IIIB in terminal ballistic mode acquires the Zolfaghar-S reentry vehicles at 31 kilometers altitude. The warheads still in their mid-course arc above the atmosphere, their kinetic heating just beginning at the edge of the upper stratosphere. The SM-2's engagement envelope at this altitude range is operating near its upper boundary, but the near-vertical trajectory that places the Zolfaghar-S at a higher mid-course apogee than a flatter trajectory would require gives the SM-2 the geometry to acquire and engage the warheads before they enter their terminal descent phase. 9 intercepts on the first SM-2 salvo at altitudes between 28 and 41 kilometers. 3 Zolfaghar-S warheads survive the first Hugh City SM-2 engagement. 2 on trajectories whose mid-course arc placed them at higher altitude than the SM-2's optimal engagement zone. 1 because the warhead's reentry vehicle cross-section produced a weaker infrared return than the engagement algorithm had assumed. USS Winston S. Churchill fires 6 additional SM-2 Block IIIB against the 3 survivors as they enter their terminal descent phase. 2 intercepts at 22 and 19 kilometers altitude. 1 Zolfaghar-S survives both SM-2 engagements, a warhead that has reached the near vertical terminal descent phase at 8 kilometers altitude, now approaching from almost directly above the USS Gravely at Mach 4.5. Its descent so steep that standard horizontal tracking close-in weapon systems cannot generate a valid engagement geometry. The Gravely's commanding officer fires 3 SM-6 Dual Y in rapid sequence. The SM-6's extended engagement envelope and its ability to engage threats on a high elevation angle approach gives it geometry where the SM-2 could not reach. The first SM-6 detonates at 4 kilometers altitude. The proximity fuse activates at 3.8 meters from the re-entry vehicle. The Zolfaghar-S warhead's structural integrity is compromised by the continuous rod fragmentation pattern. It does not achieve its fusing conditions. The casing falls in ballistic freefall and impacts the Gulf of Oman at 6 nautical miles from the Gravely's position. No detonation. A water column visible from the ship's bridge at first light. Nothing more. 12 Zolfaghar-S ballistic warheads. All 12 neutralized. 9 by SM-2 Block IIIB in mid-course. 2 by SM-2 Block IIIB in terminal phase. 1 by SM-6 Dual I at near vertical approach. Simultaneously, the 64 Shahed 238 loitering munitions are being engaged across both axes by the formation's full CEC networked missile inventory. The northwest axis. 32 Shahed 238 CIWS approaching from the direction of the Bandar Abbas coastal positions. Their turbofan exhausts tracked by the E-2D and their GPS navigation frequencies jammed by the USS Gravely's AN/SLQ-32 V6 electronic warfare suite, which activates its Shahed 238 navigation jamming profile at 2:04 a.m., the moment the launch transients are detected. 21 of 32 northwest axis Shaheds lose GPS coherence within 70 seconds of launch under the SLQ-32 jamming and begin flying degraded inertial courses that shift their approach vectors off the Truman's position. 11 maintain inertial approach bearing. USS Winston S. Churchill fires 22 ESSM Block II against the 11 surviving northwest axis Shaheds, 2 per target. 10 intercepts on the first ESSM salvo. 1 Shahed 238 survives and closes to within 9 nautical miles of the formation on the northwest bearing. The northeast axis. 32 Shahed 238 EWS on the second approach bearing, their courses designed to arrive simultaneously with the northwest wave from a divergent bearing that complicated the SLQ-32 jamming geometry. The AN/SLQ-32's jamming is most effective when the jamming signals aim directly at the approaching vehicle. The northeast axis's different bearing angle reduces the jamming effectiveness for this wave. 14 northeast axis Shaheds lose GPS coherence. 18 maintain approach bearing. USS Lassen fires 36 ESSM Block II against the 18 survivors, 2 per target. 15 intercepts. 3 Shahed 238S survived the Lassen's first ESSM salvo. 4 total Shahed 238 survivors. 1 from the northwest axis, 3 from the northeast, continuing toward the formation at 350 kilometers per hour. USS Hughes City fires 8 Ram Block II missiles from her Mark 49 launcher against the 4 survivors at ranges between 5 and 9 nautical miles. 3 intercepts. 1 Shahed 238. The northwest axis survivor that had maintained its GPS course through the partial jamming environment, closest to within 1,100 meters of the Truman's port side. The Truman's port-forward Phalanx Block 1B CIWS acquires the contact at 1,900 meters. A 1-second burst. The Shahed 238 is rendered inoperable at 1,200 meters and falls into the Gulf of Oman 840 meters off the carrier's port bow. The shaped charge detonates on water impact. The explosion throws spray over the forward flight deck edge. The deck is empty, cleared 15 minutes before at general quarters. The spray settles. No structural contact. No personnel exposed. 2:18 a.m. 12 minutes since the first Zolfaghar-S launched from the Zagros foothills. 12 Zolfaghar-S ballistic warheads, all neutralized. 64 Shahed 238 loitering munitions, 35 defeated by SLQ-32 electronic jamming, 25 by ESSM Block II, 3 by Ram Block II, 1 by Phalanx CIWS. 76 weapons total. 1 Shahed 238 detonated on water impact 840 meters from the Truman's hull. 0 weapons achieved structural contact with any ship. 0 personnel casualties. 0 structural damage to USS Harry S. Truman. The strike group commander keys his radio with the measured inflection of a man announcing a course change. All units, strike group, all 76 threat tracks neutralized. 0 hull contact, 0 casualties, 0 damage across the formation. Truman fully operational. Authorize Falcon Strike Gulf. Execute. Falcon Strike Gulf was maintained at 5th Fleet's Targeting Library and updated 36 hours before this engagement from the RC-135V/W's continuous collection of the IRGCN's Zolfaghar-S battery positions and the Shahed 238 coastal launch site coordinates. Every GPS coordinate was current. Every aim point confirmed. At 2:19 a.m., the USS Hughes City opens 12 VLS cells. 12 Tomahawk Block V missiles launched from the cruiser's forward deck in a 15-second ripple heading northwest toward Iran. USS Churchill fires 10 Tomahawks 18 seconds later. USS Gravely fires 9:20 seconds after Churchill. USS Lassen fires 9 at the same interval. 40 Tomahawk Block V missiles. 4 target complexes. Target Complex 1. The 2 Zolfaghar-S battery positions in the Zagros foothills east of Bandar Abbas. The SBIRS back computation had placed both launch origins within 40-meter accuracy, confirmed against the RC-135V/W's pre-launch electronic signature geolocation. The battery vehicles had dispersed immediately post-launch on their pre-planned routes. The fixed battery infrastructure, the surveyed firing points, their propellant support structures, the command and communications vehicles whose emissions the RC-135V/W had logged for 22 minutes before launch remained. 10 Tomahawks, 5 per battery position. The command vehicles take the first warheads. The fixed infrastructure takes the follow-on Block V penetrating warheads in sequence. Secondary detonations at one position confirm propellant support vehicle contents. The 2 IRGCN Zolfaghar-S batteries that launched tonight's ballistic component will not be operational from these positions again. Target Complex 2. The 4 Shahed 238 coastal launch positions north and east of Bandar Abbas. The E-2D's launch detection data had back-computed all 4 site locations within 90-meter accuracy, more than sufficient for Tomahawk Block V's GPS-guided delivery against fixed infrastructure. The launch vehicles had departed their positions, but the prepared launch infrastructure, the site preparation, the propellant and component storage, the communications and timing equipment, whose signals the SLQ-32 had logged throughout the engagement, remained. 12 Tomahawks, 3 per site. All 4 sites struck between 2:35 a.m. and 2:42 a.m. Target Complex. 3. The IRGCN 2nd Naval District's Bandar Abbas Strike Coordination Facility. The command node identified by the RC-135V/W's signals collection as the coordination headquarters for tonight's operation, whose communications traffic had been elevated continuously for 72 hours before the attack and dropped to near silence at 2:04 a.m. consistent with the pre-launch emissions lockout. A reinforced coastal building with satellite communications, infrastructure, and backup power. 10 Tomahawks. The satellite arrays take the first 2 warheads. The main building takes 6 Block V penetrating warheads in sequence. The backup power and secondary communications facility takes 2 additional warheads. The facility's communication signature does not reappear after 2:44 a.m. Target Complex. The IRGCN's Shahed 238 forward storage and preparation compound at Manab, northeast of Bandar Abbas, the installation identified in NRO satellite imagery as the facility from which tonight's 64 Shahed 238 vehicles had been delivered to the coastal launch positions over the preceding 3 days. A large enclosed compound with vehicle preparation buildings and component storage. 8 Tomahawks. The preparation buildings take 4 penetrating warheads. The component storage structures take 2 warheads with incendiary delay fusing. Secondary detonations visible to the P-8A conducting post-strike assessment. At 2:24 a.m., 4 A-18E Super Hornets from the Truman's flight deck, launched from the electromagnetic catapults beginning at 2:16 a.m., 12 seconds after the Phalanx engagement, deliver 16 AGM 88E advanced anti-radiation guided missiles against 4 IRGCN coastal radar sites on the Iranian coast east of Bandar Abbas, whose emissions had been logged by the USS Gravely's SLQ-32 throughout the engagement. All 4 radar sites silenced between 2:36 a.m. and 2:41 a.m. At 2:29 a.m., 2 MQ-9 Reaper unmanned aircraft from Al Udeid Air Base reached the Bandar Abbas area and began post-strike assessment of target complexes 1 and 2. Their FLIR sensors identify 3 Zolfaghar-S TAL vehicles that had reached concealment positions in the foothills southeast of their firing sites. Vehicles tracked by the MQ-9's own sensor during the post-launch dispersal phase. 3 AGM-114R Hellfire missiles. 3 vehicles. All 3 assessed as mission neutralized at their concealment positions by 2:38 a.m. By 2:47 a.m., 41 minutes after the first Zolfaghar-S launched, the Falcon Strike Gulf counter-strike is complete. Battle damage assessment: 5th Fleet Intelligence at 5:30 a.m., USS Harry S. Truman, 0 structural damage, 1 water impact detonation, 840 meters off the port bow, 0 effect. All 4 escorts, 0 damage. 12 Zolfaghar-S warheads and 64 Shahed 238 vehicles, all neutralized. 2 Zolfaghar-S battery positions, infrastructure destroyed, secondary detonation at 1, 3 TEL vehicles neutralized by MQ-9. 4 Shahed 238 coastal launch sites, all struck, fixed infrastructure destroyed. IRGCN coordination facility, communications destroyed, main structure severely damaged. Manab compound destroyed with secondary detonations. 4 IRGCN coastal radar sites, all silenced. Estimated IRGCN personnel casualties: 53 to 78. American losses: 0. 0 personnel casualties across the formation. At 2:52 a.m., the Truman Strike Group transitions from general quarters to elevated alert posture and resumes its easterly transit at 16 knots. The flight deck crew begins respotting aircraft for the 5:30 a.m. Combat Air Patrol launch. The E-2D maintains its orbit overhead. The Gulf of Oman is quiet. The IRGCN had committed its most capable precision strike assets in a coordinated 2-phase attack planned for 18 months against the transit corridor every American carrier must pass through when departing the Persian Gulf. It was detected through guidance initialization emissions 22 minutes before the first weapon launched. It was fully queued for engagement before the first Shahed 238 lifted off the coast. The Truman transits the Gulf of Oman at 16 knots and emerges into the Arabian Sea as the eastern sky begins to lighten. Reactors at 32%. Morning launches on schedule. The Gulf of Oman is behind her. The Arabian Sea is ahead. She is undamaged and on her way.